He played a move that was really unexpected. The commentators at the time were shocked. He castled queenside. Hello everyone and welcome to Howell's Hall of Fame. This is a new series highlighting some of my favorite things in the chess world, some of my favorite games, players, moments, and I'm hoping, if you like this video, that this will be a regular series. I'm going to start today by talking about one of my favorite games of all time. This is a game that took place in 1994 between Vladimir Kramnik and Garry Kasparov, two of the best players in the world at the time. Garry Kasparov was the world champion, and this was a series of tournaments. It was rapid chess, it was broadcast on TV, it was held in places like New York. It was a real forerunner of the modern chess that we see today. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, I remember being given some old VHS videotapes. I remember sneaking into my parents' room, putting the videotape in and watching these chess games. And this game specifically was commentated on by Maurice Ashley, American Grandmaster, and Danny King, an English Grandmaster. And those two commentators brought this game to life. I'm going to try and do the same for you guys now, but it was a spectacular game full of sacrifices, twists and turns, some brilliant moves. So let's jump straight in, and I hope you enjoy. So Kramnik started this game with the white pieces. It was rapid chess, and Garry Kasparov, the world champion, he played the King's Indian defense. One of the most most famous openings that he's associated with, I would say. He allows Kramnik here to occupy the center. White has beautiful pawns in the middle of the board, but black simply castles and now strikes back. The King's Indian defense is all about this black bishop. If it ever opens up, comes to life, black is doing great. Often though, the bishop gets blocked in behind its own pawns, and that's what happens in this game. Kramnik pushed this pawn forward. This is called the Petrosian system. It's named after a former world champion, Tigran Petrosian, an Armenian who was known for positional play. And this essentially gains space. White now, with this nice pawn chain in the center, aims to play on the queen side. Often you'll see white push this pawn forward a bit later on to try and play on that side of the board, while Kasparov, with the black pieces, often aims to strike on the other side of the board with a pawn a bit later. So both sides now just getting out their pieces. This is a key bishop for white. This cannot be traded off. If you lose this bishop, you lose full control over the dark squares. So Kasparov attacking this piece forced Kramnik to move it again. I don't normally recommend this, moving the same piece twice in the opening, but this does gain a bit of time back by hitting Kasparov's queen. And when the bishop was forced to retreat, we saw Kasparov start to step forward on this side of the board. So ideas now of pushing a pawn forward and hitting this bishop in the corner, which wouldn't have too many squares to run to. So dropping back now, Kramnik hitting this knight, putting some pressure on, forcing it back. And now an escape square is created for this bishop. While I was watching these games, these old videos back in the 90s, I just remember Kramnik being so calm. Kramnik was only 19 years old at the time, but he had a massive hair. He was, had a big presence at the board. He was a scary opponent to face. And Kasparov, who'd already been world champion for nearly 10 years, he was already feeling the heat. So he dropped his knight back now. There's actually annoying pressure along this diagonal. It means that the black pawn here is pinned and cannot move. And if black cannot step this pawn forward, the other pawn forward would be weakening, then it's really difficult to get any active play going for black. So, okay, Kramnik now moving his queen forward. And in my eyes, the first brilliant move of this game, 90% of the time in the King's Indian defense, when black is set up in this way, you see the white king castle to the right, to the king side, and try to seek safety over there. But Kramnik now, he went the other way. He played a move that was really unexpected. The commentators at the time were shocked. He castled queenside. This nearly never happens in the King's Indian defense. It is the side that technically should be a bit weaker. It's being stared down now, the white king, by this bishop along this diagonal. Also, it's just a bit more airy. You have fewer pawns on this flank. You're further away from the corner. In chess, you want to be towards the corner to hide out, to seek safety. So this was a bit of a surprise and made Kasparov frown. The world champion, he was known for his expressive tendencies during games. He was not happy being surprised on every move like this. I should mention that after his next move, Kasparov, blocking up the center, There was maybe a controversial decision here. For those of you who love watching chess, who are more experienced, you'll be familiar with this move en passant. White taking this pawn as if it just moved one square. So whenever your opponent tries to bypass, you can take, and that's what happened. But the reason I think it's controversial is because actually White's pawn chain here is already beautiful. You have the connect four, you have full control, the board is essentially cut in half, and maybe the best move would have been instead to retreat White's bishop and now to throw pawns forward towards the black king. This is the target. Opposite side castling, kings on opposite flanks mean you need to attack, and throwing this pawn forward to h4, followed by the next pawn going to g4, would have been the way to cement the advantage. But Kramnik, he was young at the time, he was full of energy, full of aggression, so going back, he did break the pawn structure. He played en passant, and now the game becomes much more open. So instead of blocked, slower play, it becomes more dynamic, more quick. And here, Kasparov, after the white king slid into the corner, he started pushing his pawn towards Kramnik's king. This pawn is rolling. It's going to keep stepping forward as a battering ram, trying to open up some shelter. Kramnik blocked that pawn. I like to say that knights on the rim are dim, but this knight is actually on an outpost. It cannot be challenged by any enemy pawns. So not the worst post for a knight. Now Kasparov blocking up the center yet again. We see his idea, Kramnik dropping back here. He spotted a new outpost in the center of the board, losing time, but things have changed. The landscape constantly changing per move, but this was Kasparov's big plan. He wants to bring his bishop in now, plant it in the center of the board. Bishops are not as strong as knights in outposts, however, so this knight landing in for Kramnik, much stronger than the opposing piece. And now we see the play continue. Essentially, both sides trying to get rid of their opponent's strong pieces. This is a real fight, the clash of titans here. Kramnik trying to get rid of Kasparov's strong bishop. And we see next move, Kasparov trying to get rid of Kramnik's strong knight in the center. We now see the first big exchange of the game. Now black has a very strong protected passed pawn, so any endgames are fantastic for black. This pawn is just going to march forward, and any endgame can't be stopped. And that means Kramnik should play dynamically, aggressively. This is a good tip for everyone at home. If you're struggling long term, try and play quickly, try and go on the attack before the long term factors kick in. And here it becomes clear that Kramnik is the aggressor, Kasparov is the defender, not a role that Kasparov liked. He became world champion by attacking. But here it is Kramnik with these pawns, with these exchanges, with this pin, with his strong knight in the center, clearly on the front foot. Meanwhile, Kramnik going for the Kasparov king. The rook slides across. Kramnik does the same, lining up on the f-file here. Knight to h6. Not a happy move, but a necessary one, just defending this pawn. And now this is where the flurry of tricks, tactics, it begins. Kramnik starts by opening up even more lines. He pushes this pawn forward. It's a sacrifice, a pure sacrifice here, but there's more to come. The idea is simply to clear the path for this bishop. A new diagonal has opened. And actually, this is where Kasparov makes his first real mistake. He should try to block this diagonal, firstly by actually taking a pawn, but after a capture in the center, now he should take the white knight. And we would have seen a position here with two bishops against two knights, and it's really unclear who is on the stronger side here. The two bishops, normally great in an open board, but the two black knights now anchored by their own pawns, on nice post, controlling the center. This would have been a double-edged fight, chances level. Instead, Kasparov, if we go back, played the right idea, but in the wrong order. He first traded off this knight in the center, and the downside is now he's opened up a diagonal for this queen. The queen is lurking, she's threatening the g6 pawn. That is hanging with a check. So Kasparov had to spend a bit of time blocking, and now beautiful sacrifices. This is Kramnik before he became more of a positional player. He later defeated Kasparov in the year 2000 to become world champion, 6 years after this game was played. But in those days, he was an attacking player before he refined his style. So knight takes, bishop was threatened, but Kramnik doesn't care. He takes in the center, allowing his bishop to drop, and look at these pawns. Three strong pawns now, passed pawns, so close to touchdown, marching forward. and big threats in the air, not just with these pawns, but also against the airy king here. Kasparov hated defending. He brought his knight into the center now. This allows another pawn to drop. So we see currently on the left half of the board, the queenside here, it's 5 pawns for Kramnik, only 1 for Kasparov. So a huge pawn advantage, but black does have this extra knight, which now jumped back into the game. And he's already thrown a lot of fuel onto the fire, Kramnik. He throws more. Rook takes knight. Another brilliant move, another amazing sacrifice. If we do a count here, he's currently a whole rook down. But the more important matters here are the openness of the black king and the fact that white has this beautiful pawn wedge that keep black's queen caged. There's actually nowhere the black queen can really go. There's no way she can really get into the defense. And here, Kasparov tried to cover some of the holes by moving his king up the board. Bishop takes pawn, another pawn drops. Currently, the count is 7 pawns for Kramnik, only 2 pawns for Kasparov. So actually materials level, rook down, but 5 pawns in return. And now after the rook came across defending, a blunder by Kasparov, we see a brilliant check. Remember, this was rapid chess. Kramnik had no time to think, but he spotted it. Forcing moves first, that's my advice always. Looking for checks, captures and threats. This check forces the black king back, because if the knight were to take this rook, yes, Kramnik would be 2 rooks down, but he can give checkmate. He can throw his queen in, check, and drop it in. Finally, kiss of death on f7 with a checkmate. So if we go back, the rook was poisoned. The rook was untouchable. Black king stepping back instead, allowing the white queen in. Watch how the white queen's trying to get into this square, making sure that the black knight has to stay defending, cannot move. Kasparov tried to defend from the side, but this is so slow. Not much he can do here. The pawns finally start advancing, both of them now 2 squares away from touchdown. And Kasparov had about 5 seconds left on the clock here. He went into desperation mode. Essentially, he's lost anyway with black, but he tried a desperado, as we call it in chess, a desperate sacrifice. Check. Luring the white king out. Another check with the black queen. And if the white king moves to the side here, if the white king slides anywhere onto the c-file, the black queen could continue giving checks, and this might have ended in a draw, a perpetual check. But Kramnik had looked further, he'd seen deeper. He realized he can go on a bit of an adventure now, and a king march between 2 kings of chess. The king steps forward. Note how this square is protected by white's rook, so there's no checkmate. And Kasparov has to keep checking before his own king gets checkmated here. Any time the checks dry up, it is white's turn to deliver checkmate. So a check forcing the white king up, another check forcing the white king in, and now look at how the white king hides behind the enemy pawn. This black pawn is actually a shield for Kramnik's king. And another check, king marches forward, another check, the pawn blocks, and it was time for Kasparov to resign. When I was watching this game on the videos, I still see it in my memory. Kasparov reacting, shocked, shaking his head, standing up in despair. Kramnik at the time, he might have been a teenager, he might have been just 19, but he was already a mainstay on the Russian national team. He was actually handpicked by Kasparov himself, his opponent in this game. Kasparov said, look, we need Kramnik on the Russian team. Kramnik wasn't even a grandmaster when he made his debut for Russia. Russia had so many grandmasters at the time, the most grandmasters in the world. They still do to this day. But Kasparov said, no, he is the future of Russian chess. But that came back to haunt him. Although Kramnik did great for the Russian national team, he later defeated Kasparov in this game. He later went on to steal Kasparov's title. It felt like full circle. Kasparov picked out his future successor from the pack, and Kramnik, yeah, he became a bit of a legend. He's had a very long, very adventurous career, lots of ups and downs for Kramnik. He changed his style many times throughout his career, but as a youngster, he was an attacker, and he showed it in this game. If you want to see more of these, and if you want to see any specific games covered, this is the Hall of Fame. I'll see you next time for another episode.